the number of migrants at the southern border is down. Mexico has blocked many asylum seekers from crossing and has transported them to places deep in the country's interior. Allen, whenever I see a story about immigration, of course, I think of you. I go to your Twitter account to see what you have to say about it. So this report out that the number of migrants at the southern border is down. Some of the stories I read said that it's down because of actions taken by the Biden administration as well as by the Mexican government or the government of Mexico. Help us understand what's happening at the southern border.
So I think the Biden administration is doing what they can without Congress's help to sort of manage the flow of migrants coming to the border. And the border influx is down 70% because now the Biden administration basically has an online app for people to apply to get asylum to come into the United States. That is a lottery system, and that is not what we had in mind when we set up the asylum rules. So there are a lot of people who don't have internet access, don't have phones that take picture, aren't in areas where they can get Wi-Fi that are being denied access. And many of those people are brown or black like myself, or speak a language different than Spanish and English and maybe French. So it disenfranchises a group of people. So I'm not shouting that out, but it is sort of controlling what's happening at the border. And unfortunately, you have not seen the news say one thing about that, of the success of this sort of program and it sort of ending. What you see now is there were 4 or 6 states that have Republican governors that sent more people, their National Guard, to the border for no reason. You have Governor Abbott, who has a failing infrastructure in his own country, spending money on building a wall that is making flood the state of Texas. And so what you have in Mexico, in addition to all these problems that we discussed with the United States, is that there is a Mexican scheme against Black and brown people as well, in which they are incentivized to push people back. So many of the immigrants who would be standing outside the border now are further back in Mexico, one, because of climate. As we all know, it's record heat in the United States from Arizona to Florida, so it's also hot at the border. So people are sort of avoiding that heat that's sort of down there, as well as sort of making it look like there's not a problem right now. Mexico does have an interest in making sure that the border remains open and that we don't have this great penalty of the Trump administration or DeSantis, right? You actually have the president of Mexico speaking against DeSantis in a very hard way and telling people not to go to Florida to even vacation anymore. So it is not, while we don't have the people on the television and the Biden administration, as well as the vice president, are not getting their claim for sort of bringing down the numbers and ending with the end of Title 42, people still aren't getting the justice they deserve through asylum, but it's better. But the news isn't covering it. And that's really the bad problem, right? Because that is exactly what every Republican runs on.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Professor Howard, because if there's not a full-blown border crisis, these Republicans have to make something up. So Allen said they're sending the National Guard to the border, even though there's no need to send the National Guard to the border. So if these numbers continue to come down or to remain low in the way that they are now, what are the Republicans going to run on? Because they can't keep screaming the border, the border, the border.
Yeah, I think Allen makes some really good points here, Areva. And even if we continue to see the numbers plummet like they are, I think the Republicans will continue to try to tell us that the numbers aren't as promising as they are. This is what the Republican agenda is these days. It's about sort of bait and switch, hoodwink, bamboozle. Let me tell you what is truth is not really truth, and what's not really truth, let me tell you that is truth, right? I think part of what we have to continue to understand is that what was so abhorrent was to see some of the images that were being shown along the southern border over the last couple of months, right? The kind of, inhumane conditions that people were subjected to, the pictures that were being shown of women and children not being given the kind of appropriate supports. Those kinds of images of human suffering is what Republicans love to exploit. Now, they'll talk about the fact that this is unacceptable at the southern border, but then you look at states like Mississippi, Georgia, Texas, Alabama. They have some of the highest poverty rates of Americans in the country, yet they will ignore the human suffering in their own respective states, but act as if it's such an atrocity to see the suffering of immigrants who are trying to get to this country. So I think this is all about bait and switch. Let me tell you something that your eyes don't see. Let me try to create a narrative that is not what the reality is. And unfortunately, Areva, you know this, many Americans buy it hook, line, and sinker, and that's the problem.
Yeah, these antics, Allen, we're here in California, and we keep getting busloads of immigrants bused to California, obviously for no apparent reason other than to get news headlines on Fox and to create, again, this image that, quote unquote, woke cities like Los Angeles, if we won't support closing the borders off, then we have to be responsible for these individuals. Do you think that's going to, you're a lawyer, Allen, let me ask you this. I know that governors like Gavin Newsom and others are saying they want investigations of these governors in Texas and Florida who are obviously defrauding these people, misleading them, lying to them, and kidnapping them, kidnapping these people and putting them on these buses. Do you see any charges coming, or should the DOJ be more aggressive in looking at what these governors are doing?
Bingo, bingo, bingo. It should be the DOJ. It's a violation of international law to move children between states. And you saw that DeSantis was really selective in the last group of people. And even Abbott are making sure they're getting adults now because they did send some children to Martha's Vineyard, which is kidnapping. And kidnapping under international law is something they should be in international court for. But beyond that, the Department of Justice knows that they're using people as pawns. And by moving people who entered the state in Texas to California when they didn't want to go to California, it hurts their asylum process. They have to then move their case to asylum, which could cost them years of backlog processing, which is just cruel to people in general. Plus, you promise them jobs which are not there. So a whole ton of misleading things. Florida is paying to have people, the state of Florida, the Republican-controlled government has decided that they want to use up to $12 million to send people from other states to other places. In the United
you mean
States.
not even people in Florida?
No, DeSantis took people from Texas. The original place to Martha's Vineyard are people that were in Texas that he lured from Texas to go to Martha's Vineyard. And then once again, they took people from Texas. So then they passed a rule saying that he could move them from any state. And the people, the product that he's sort of buying, the mode of transportation are Republican funders. So they're just funneling the money through the system over and over again. And I know that Merrick Garland has his hands full with the trash that was left behind by the former administration. But I would love to see someone from civil rights come out swinging hard on these cases. And not just that, the state of Texas has set up their own border control. They are not allowed to parole the border. How long are we going to let people get away with that? It sends the wrong message to other states to start thinking, oh, well, we can just start our own law enforcement state, because guess who they're arresting? 96% of the people that were picked up by them were people of what? That's right, Hispanic descent. And were many of them U.S. citizens? Absolutely. So were they violated? Yes. And did they say anything besides sorry? Did they have due process? Right? Can Texas deport people from whatever they consider a country? Absolutely not. So all of those things are sort of fictions that we need to sort of help correct along the way. And even when we're sort of dealing with this at that level, right, there's still the Black immigrants who aren't even getting to there, right? The Black immigrant that died, the 8-year-old girl, was a Haitian girl, right? That her mom said that she was sick. They said, no, she ain't sick. They ignored her. They said, she's sick, please take care of her. And then she died in custody. And then they had a funeral in New York City. But once again, this never happened before in any other administration where children were dying in custody.
Yeah. Why do you think the DOJ, obviously, as you said, they're busy. They got thousands of people still being prosecuted because of the January 6th insurrection. They've got, the myriad investigations involving Donald Trump. But why do you think that the DOJ hasn't gotten more involved?
I think they're afraid. There's a couple of things that I think that they think that every time they charge someone, it's political. And what I would love for them to know is that the political fight is over after the election is closed. And if you violate the law, you get the full repercussions. I think the former president has also enjoyed some lightness because he won an election and they don't want to be seen as political. Well, unfortunately, we're in a political scheme now, and we need to prosecute everybody who breaks the law.
Yeah, it's just shocking to me that we're not seeing more being done legally because, as you said, there are obviously international crimes, federal crimes that are being committed with this kidnapping of these individuals.